Not. There we go.
Hey, there we go.
There we go.
Finally. Okay, everyone. Welcome. Yes, make the best. I do like to be fashionably late. Welcome to Masculine Geek number 103. Guest, Mr. Robert Cousland. And we have him here on one of the best days of the week, and one of the best shows on the internet, Masculine Geek. So Robert, and pause that. So Robert is an actor, a broadcaster, a Grey Warden, which I'm curious to know what that is, a student of history, a swordsman. He's into anime, manga, tokusatsu. There we go. I eventually get that right. He's a sci-fi and fantasy aficionado and a lover of music, particularly hard rock and metal. So we're going to talk about all of those things on this stream tonight. And of course, Rob is all happy about that shit.
Fuck yeah.
There we go. So actually, let's get started because I had asked you about your name. There was an interesting small history anecdote regarding the pronunciation of your name.
Well, the last name is pronounced, at least the way I pronounce it, is Cousland. And it's basically a bastardization or alteration to Coastland, the same way that people who are Ratcliffe, with all the myriad spellings of both pronunciations, is basically comes from the name Redcliffe, which is the area or region that particular family would have originated from, or at least originated from when that name was given to them. Because like a lot of different families who originate from England, they could have originally came from Normandy, France, and before that somewhere in, Viking lands, and the same way with other people in England, and some of whom were the original occupants, or at least a lot more original than the various Norse, Swedish, Danish people that eventually ended up there and created the amalgam that we know as the subjects of Great Britain in the modern day. So that's kind of the origin in the name, which kind of ties into the Grey Warden thing that you were asking about. Mm-hmm. One of the video game Dragon Age, one of the primary protagonists in the first Dragon Age game is a Grey Warden. And there are several different race combinations that you could have picked. You could have been a dwarf, an elf, a couple of different types of elves at that, a couple different types of dwarves, or you could have been a human noble. And the last name of the human noble family just happens to be Cousland. And so the same name, obviously, I played a character named Robert Cousland. And because it was, not very often that you get to use your name in a video game as far as the whole thing. And so that's where that comes from. And one of the early characters that I did in recent years, a lot of costuming was as a Grey Warden, which I'm sure there are some pictures online. In fact, at one point in time, I was one of the top. If you search Grey Warden or Grey Warden costume, I was like one of the primary pictures you saw.
Oh, cool.
That would come up. And because I made a suit of armor to match the video game. And whereas a lot of people, for various reasons, not least of which being that it's much, much easier to manufacture, use foam and other things because they're literally just costumes. Ego, or just as someone who acts, a costume really helps you get into character. So I liked the feel and the weight of a heavier costume, which meant, my armor is actually made of steel and aluminum and hardened leather. And whenever I can get away with it, have an actual high carbon sword that hangs from my hip because just the weight of it feels so nice. And plus, one of the few good things about living in Indianapolis is, by Indiana state law, as long as I'm not threatening people with my sword, I am more than welcome to carry one on my hip in public. So
okay, that was my next question. Yeah, because I remember the story of Viggo Mortensen during the filming of Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
he was walking around to get into character. He was walking
Yeah.
around with his sword on a daily basis and taking it with him to cafes and places like that. And a lot of
Mhm.
people looking at him and like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Well, I mean, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Obviously, in some places, I have to have prop swords that are wood or foam or something else. Some of them look more realistic than others. But the thing is, obviously, a real sword of any length or size or style has genuine weight to it. And depending on where you're carrying it, it affects the way you walk. It affects the way you sit. It affects the way you interact with your environment. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think all men should be trained with swords at a young age, and when they grow up, you should be able to wear one. And I think we'd be a little bit more politer society with, you decide you want to be a schmuck, and a guy has a hand and a half sword on his hip, and it's like, really, you want to go there, But
Right. Yeah. Seriously.
but no, it just there is something genuinely pleasant about it. I mean, it's one of those things that I think just kind of pulls you in, and it's like a really good workout when you hit the gym and you have a really good day and you really kind of push yourself, and you've done all your sets and you're like, I've done everything. I've even I've done a few more sets. I've upped my weight, but man, I'm still hungry for it. I think I'm gonna go do some cardio. I think I'm gonna hit the treadmill, or,
Yeah.
or I'm gonna hit the bike for a little bit, because
You're pumped. You're on a roll.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not done yet. And when you put on a costume like that, that's real, that has some weight to it, and especially when you have a real sword on your hip, or you're having real steel armor, whether that's
Mm.
a 70-pound chain shirt over your, weighing down on your shoulders, um, or steel plates, even just fastening on leather armor, or layers of padded armor. It's just a really, really nice feeling, and gets you kind of pumped up, and definitely makes you feel like a man, which considering this is the masculine geek,
Absolutely.
and plus they say you always dress for the job you want. So,
Mhm.
I want to be a medieval knight, or
I like
know.
it. Now, this is Bull Rush found this. This is you right here,
Ah,
correct?
yes, yeah, that
Okay.
is. That basically is, in D&D terms, that would be padded armor, but
Mm.
that's basically just a gambeson, which is a couple layers of thick, tough, fibrous material with padding in between sewn, and that's over a shirt or tunic, and then the belt and the gloves and the boots and so on and so forth. Now, and then over the top of that would go armor, whether it would be a
Gotcha.
suit of chain, and then you would have your tabard over that, or a suit of plate, and or there are other different types of armor, but that's
Yeah.
that would be something that you would be wearing in camp before battle or before tournament, where you would have your squire help you put on your armor. Unfortunately, I've been blessed with 4 sons, so at various times in my life when I've needed a squire,
I was
I've
about to
had
say
one
they're your
handy.
squires. Yeah.
Yeah, although the youngest right now, who would love to have the job, is only 6.
Hmm.
So
You carry your helmet, like kind of waddling around.
yeah. Well, his older brother, his next oldest brother, who's 21 now and about to graduate from college, um, when he was probably about 6 or 7, wanted to try on my chain shirt, and like I said, that's about 70 pounds.
Oh shit.
And so I put it on him, and he looked like, if you remember the scene in the second Lord of the Rings movie where they're in Helm's Deep, and they're getting suited up for battle, and the dwarf pulls, Gimli pulls over the suit of chain, and it drops down to the floor, and it bunches up there, and he's like,
it's a little tight across the chest.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what he looked like. Although as small as he was, and the fact that he looked very similar to Harry Potter, he looked like a Hobbit Harry Potter wearing a oversized suit of chain. So, but anyway, funny. So yeah, I got 4 sons between the ages of 6 and almost 31. So,
okay, wow.
Yeah, 4 sons by 3 women. I think on a
holy shit.
Yeah,
I like it. Now, Bacon has a question for you.
Sure.
He wants to know your preferred style of long blade.
I like using shorter swords, and I like fighting two-handed. Although often, either because of what I'm doing as required at either a convention. For example, I was at PAX actually earlier in 2021. A European video game company was releasing a video game based on a German role-playing game known as The Dark Eye in English, Das Schwarze Auge in German. And they asked me to be there in costume, and contracted me basically to fly out to Boston and put me up and fed me and forth. And I was there promoting the game in costume. So hand and a half, a long sword and some kind of short sword or a long dagger is my preferred comfortable style. Because when I was younger and a little bit lighter and a lot more nimble on my feet, it just, I liked the versatility of fighting that way. And of course, having studied actual rapier fencing, I would be using a standard sporting rapier. And plus, as in my offhand, depending on the situation, there are all kinds of things you could use, whether it was a dirk, a cloak, a cape, or even a some kind of a drinking goblet or something like that, a tankard. So and it just, the difference between doing things as a performance because you're a performer, or if you're doing things because an artist has hired you as a model, and so you have to put on the costume to do things. That way they can see, okay, how does the sword hang? How do the belts cross? Where does the cloth fold? Where does the armor bunch? Okay, now what kind of poses can you do? Battle poses, whatever. And just so that they can kind of get an idea. And then, more often than not, pictures are taken. And then from that, they use it to do their work. And sometimes the character looks similar to me. Sometimes they look absolutely nothing like me at all.
Oh, cool.
But it would be like if I were hired to play a stormtrooper in a Star Wars movie. Well, no one's going to know it's me because I'm hired to keep the helmet on and play the stormtrooper. So since I'm a much smaller actor in the grand scheme of things, I don't have the ego issue that most of the actors that play superheroes. I know I'm Captain America, but you've got to see my face. I know I'm Spider-Man, and no one's supposed to know who Peter Parker is, but you've got to see my face. It's there in my contract. I don't have those kind of issues.
Yeah. Now, as far as you're talking about acting, how did that come about? And was it always, did it start with you doing modeling for a medieval armor and weapons?
It actually started from doing broadcasting.
Oh, okay.
Playing all your classic favorite hits on your home for the oldies 101.9. That kind of stuff.
Check that out. All right, cool. So, is that something you still pursue, or is it that's in the past?
It is. I love radio. The joke about radio is that that's the job where anyone goes who's literally not suited for polite society. Aaron would be in radio. I mean, personality wise, voice wise is different, but I mean, he has that kind of mentality, you know, working midnight till 6 a.m. with drinking on the job, maybe a girl showing up at the radio station, you know, going to the bathroom, playing Dark Side of the Moon, whatever. But I mean, that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, those days of broadcasting don't really exist anymore, or at least not on terrestrial radio stations, because all of them are owned by huge corporations. And you know, your local DJ on your classic rock station is actually a guy broadcasting from his home studio, recording a show every day or a couple of shows in the course of a day. And they play at whatever their slotted time on all of the Clear Channel radio stations that are the classic rock stations. So, and this is especially true for the your Hanks and your Jakes and Johns, those name stations that have computer audio drops in and things like that. And it's just, I was fortunate that I actually got to work for mom and pop independent radio stations, and worked at one of the very last ones here in the state of Indiana, at least in the Indianapolis area, which obviously is not a, you know, it's a pretty good sized market. It's not like, you know, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, L.A. by any means, but you know, it was still a real life radio station monitored by the FCC, with the program director that occasionally listened to make sure you weren't, you know, goofing off on air and, you know, talking too much when you were supposed to be playing music and stuff like that. So, and so I got to do a lot of different things. So I got to actually be a DJ, introing songs, outroing songs, doing weather, more than traffic. I did traffic once, but mostly doing weather, doing the DJ thing, and then doing a lot of programming, producer type stuff. So I would be one of 2 or 3 people that worked the entire weekend. And so in the case of when it was an oldies format, Dick Clark's Golden Oldies and all those kind of weekend 2-hour radio shows or 3-hour radio shows, I was the guy actually in the station playing everything and dropping in the commercials when they needed to be played, and actually played the carts. So we did have some things that were digital. A lot of our audio library was digital, but we still played carts. We still played digital audio tape, DATs. We actually had a turntable so that on the weekends we could play vinyl during one of our request shows. We even had a reel-to-reel. So I still had all the old stuff I kind of trained with at like WBDG, which was like my high school radio station.
Yeah.
But so no, that kind of led to it. So doing stuff with my voice led to me doing some things and doing some like voice acting and narration and things like that. Some characters, but impersonation wise, I'm kind of limited. I mean, I can do a little bit more than I think, but you know, Bob Dylan, that kind of stuff. I mean, pretty simple, you know, imitations, not nearly like the guys that get paid the big bucks to do the Saturday morning cartoons and the stuff for Nickelodeon and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that, and plus I was interested in theater and stuff when I was in school, although most of the kids in theater at the high school were nozzles. And I had a choice between trying to do that and putting up with a bunch of schmucks, or I could play drums in marching band and, you know, hang out with the girls in the flag line and stuff like that. And, you know, I was young, I was hormonal, and like most men, you know, 95% of all my mistakes in life involve women, 99% of all the really serious mistakes. So yeah, that's what I did. And plus I love music. So trying to play drums was something I was definitely into.
Gotcha. All right, cool.
So yeah, that kind of led to it. And I had friends that were artists, and I was into gaming, and a geek. Hence why one of the reasons I'm here. And so it was just a lot of different roads that kind of led me there, and friends who were like, hey, you can do this, you can talk, and you're not afraid to talk. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. It's like, hey, would you be willing to drive to Chicago to this convention and like do a couple of panels on stuff? And it's like, well, panels on what? I don't know. Do it on Japanese cartoons, do it on animation, do it on general fandom lore and things like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do that if it means I get a hotel room for free and con badge for free, and I get to hang out with some friends and get into trouble. It's like, sure, I'll do that. There are worse ways to spend a weekend.
Absolutely. Yeah, seriously. That's pretty cool. Are you working on any big projects now?
That
you can talk about?
Captain Trips, as I like to call it, kind of really buggered up things. 2020 was looking to be a very, very busy year. I was approached by another video game company about doing an audition, and did some stuff for them that they seemed pleased with. And they were talking to me about doing a video game character, which I was really excited about. And another artist friend had a project he wanted to work on with me. And then there were a couple other conventions, including another convention in Germany in which I was going to be traveling to. And all of that was canceled. So right now, I finished up doing the narration. There was a series of videos done on the role-playing game, The Dark Eye. And these videos were originally done. One set of them was done with artwork and animation from the actual game. The others were done with Lego bricks, doing characters. And these Dark Eye lore videos were done in German with a female voice. And they had actually approached me after interviewing me at Gen Con a few years ago and said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? So I just finished up the last of those. And then I actually have a book that I kind of sort of working in on editing, a role-playing book that I'm editing at the moment, which I've kind of done a couple, but more of a proofreader. Hey, you're an English speaker, you know the game. We have this thing. The German word is such and such. The literal English is this. Do you like this or do you like that? And it's like, no, do it this way and stuff. So I'm actually listed in a couple of fairly recent RPG books for the Dark Eyes that have come out in the thank you section. But this one that I've been talked to and looks to be an actual full edit, in which case I will be the English editor if I choose to do it. So that's probably the next big thing on my plate, which has absolutely nothing to do with acting, voice acting, or modeling, but basically working on an RPG book, which I know you guys play D&D. I mean, I've watched the games, so and I'm sure you probably were into it when you were younger. So the idea of 12-year-old you, hey, one day you'll be writing, editing, submitting, posing for artwork, whatever, in any kind of RPG would have been like, yeah, right. And Cheryl Teagues is going to go to the prom with me. So, tell me another one. And, but so, so that's kind of it. So, right now I'm, a lot of my time is taken up looking at stuff for this German game company and called Ulysses Spiel. And like I said, their product is the Dark Eye. And if I can hold on a second.
Sure. A little geek and tell.
This is the hardcover core rule book. And if I can get it, so the glare.
No, you got it right there. Yep.
Yeah. And
nice.
So
that's a nice cover.
Yeah. This is a core rule. The artwork in it is pretty spectacular. It is a dense game. It is a grown-up game in the sense that it's a very serious, contemplative game. There's a lot going on. One of the terms I hear used a lot is crunch. There's a lot of crunch to it as far as
it's crunchy as far as the game mechanics.
And which is absolutely great. Because like I said, it's a very there's just if you are remotely intellectual, there's just a lot here to intrigue you, and the option
that's nobody here, so you're fine. You're
good. But I mean, the like if I can get that dwarf.
That's good right there. Yeah, that's neat. All right, cool.
And
are they holding some sort of flame blade?
Yeah, he was. I believe he was forging a sword in that one.
Okay, it looked like there was some molten flame going on there.
But let's see.
No shit.
Yeah, this is the first part of the basically what would essentially be the monster manual.
Bestiary.
And but the continent is called Aventuria, and this is a 5th edition of this game. So like D&D's in its 5th edition, this is the 5th edition for the Dark Eye. The difference is, if you can imagine that in every edition of Dungeons and Dragons, from 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 3.5, what have you, there was only one game setting. Everybody played in Greyhawk, or everybody played in Blackmoor. And that world developed. And it wasn't just Gary Gygax and some of his friends whose characters were mentioned as spell names or legendary heroes of antiquity and Greyhawk, but actual players from over the years who played at, the people who played Tomb of Horrors at Gen Con way back in the day. Whatever few hardy souls survived that, either by the first set of traps that killed off everyone but 1 or 2 people, the one person who survived said, yeah, I'm good, took all the loot from their dead compatriots and left, and I win. I'm still standing.
Aaron Clary, what?
Yeah the Aaron of their group, right. Actually became a character mentioned in the game. And so that's
don't give me any ideas.
Yeah, that's the thing. This game has such a rich history and a rich lore that it's like playing in the Lord of the Rings, as far as there being so much there that you love, but the option for destroying the one ring hasn't been taken off the board yet. So
okay, cool.
Because I mean, which is a problem you always have with a game system like that. Whether you're playing the old West End Star Wars game, whether you're playing Lord of the Rings, whatever, you aren't Frodo, you don't get to toss the ring into Mount Doom. You're not Luke Skywalker, you don't get to blow up the Death Star. That's somebody else's role. So we got to create our own grand heroic thing that can kind of rival that or be that cool for us to play as a group, but we can't do these things. Well, in the Dark Eye, it's not like that, but it's as rich like that as far as the setting of the world, but you get to do those sorts of things. And the mechanics in it are such that you can be a well-armed knight on full tournament plate, or even your war plate, riding on a war horse. And yes, you have the advantage in combat going up against some farmer or some merchant. But guess what? Sometimes farmers with pitchforks get lucky and they can kill you. And that is a possibility within the game. And so it's built in such a way that you can design a character to be whatever you want it to be. And depending on what your group wants to do, you can run games that you could have a bunch of people who are all into court intrigue and, politicking and things like that. and you can play that in this game. You don't have to play hack and slash. Now, if you want to go out and you want to fight monsters and you want to, rescue, kidnap children or princesses or what have you, yes, you can do that too. But the setting is such that there's just a lot of different options. And like I said, it's an absolutely beautiful game. And one of the sets that they've released in Germany, I'm not going to try and pronounce the German name, but the close to literal translation is Ways of Association, and it's literally, I'm sure you guys are old enough to remember the old Dragon magazine and the old the comic strips, what Phil and Dixie, they used to joke about, and in next issue, sex in D&D. Well, the Dark Eye, actually, in the German edition, they have that book. That's one of the supplement books. So you can literally, you want to go to a brothel, you want to go to one of the 12 divine personages in that world is the goddess of love. So if you want to visit one of her temples and be seduced, they actually have game mechanics for that as one of the game supplements. So
I want to have sex with her. Okay, give me a roll.
Yeah. They've actually worked it out so that it's something a little bit more than that, and it's like I said, it's a really great game, and it's probably modern fantasy RPGs. It is the one I'm probably most interested in.
Cool.
So I see there's a question.
There is.
Fencing in college, some fencing classes when I was in junior high and high school. Did not participate in the SCA, although I was super excited to when I was getting close to being of age to join. I actually went to a local group's meeting and gathering and watched their sparring and so forth. And it's like, yeah, I really want to do this. And I met some of the people, and this would have been in the mid to late 1980s, and I was just really turned off by how cliquish and insulary, and well, if you want to do something, you have to do it this way, and if you're going to get armor, you should really get this person's armor as opposed to doing your own. And if you're going to make something, machine stitching, the thread count and the numbers of stitches, it just, I'm sorry. If I wanted to walk around sniffing your posterior, I would be a dog, and I'm just no. So I was really turned off, and had basically nothing to do with the SCA. Although, in their defense, probably about 8 to 10 years ago now at Dragon Con, I was there doing some stuff and modeling for a friend of mine who was an artist, and was wearing my chain. It was more of a Norman style, chain shirt and chain over the head, Norman style helmet, sword, tabard, and so forth. And I had a lady come up because the colors I was wearing, I guess, was their local SCA chapter's kingdom. And so she came up to ask me who I was and if I was in the SCA. And I guess the look of repugnance or disdain or something, I didn't have a very good poker face, I guess. And she's like, I know there's a story there, so you got to tell me. So long story short, yeah, I've met some nice people since then, and she recognized that my complaints were not uncommon, especially for local SCA chapters at that point in time. And I'm sure that's probably universally true at various places. So I'm sure there are probably some really nice people in the SCA in your neighborhood, but there are probably some real schmucks in somebody else's. So
it's true. It's like any group of people. There's a few winners and a whole lot of losers.
Right.
That's how that works. The 80-20 rule it's universal everywhere, in any human endeavor.
Right. So, I mean, the idea of going to something, a big event like Penzig and competing in tournaments, or just, hanging out in garb, as I think they refer to it, and camping out and drinking mead and eating, red meat off the bone like a dwarf and
Red
stuff
meat
like
off
that,
the bone.
and playing some kind of weird dwarven heavy metal from your tent is just, yeah, I think that would be a real blast, but it's just not happened yet.
Yeah.
Just
Sounds like there was a fast track into whatever social clique had already formed in there. Were you like offered something like, hey, if you do go buy from this person, if you do talk to this person, then you could be in with us. Did you ever have that conversation, or was it more subtle?
It was a lot more subtle than that. I mean, the implication was, maybe you'll be one of us, kind of a thing. And I spent 8 years in the military, which to some of my close friends is absolutely shocking, because they're to certain people who know me, including some of the women with whom I've been married or in long-term relationships, the idea of anyone giving me orders, they just can't envision. And but I was young. I was 17 when I enlisted in the service. I actually went to basic training, had to go back and do my last year of high school, and then go on to my advanced training. So, but yeah, I got to be 17, gave the papers to my parents. Here, sign this so I can leave this nut house. And that's what happened. Well, I'm the oldest. Well, depending on the family, I am the oldest of 8 kids, the youngest of 3 kids, and an only child. So there you go. There's your riddle for the evening.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, in the house I grew up in, I was the oldest of 8. So
was that a Catholic household?
my mother wanted to convert to Catholicism when she was younger. And her father would not allow it. So instead, my mother, who was 19 in 1968, was a pro-military, free love, pagan, etc., etc.
Gotcha.
When Rollo talks about the women that the new religion is love, that's my mother's theology. That I guarantee it. So
I understand all the siblings.
Yeah. So yeah, and there actually would have been more, but she had 2 miscarriages, which is probably more information about my mother. But my mother would give you that information anyway, because my mother loves telling her life story to strangers. So, but yeah, so it was a big family. Let's see, 3 bedroom, 1 bath. So yeah. A squad bay with 60 strangers was preferable.
I'm sure. Yeah. Jesus. I'm going to switch gears. We're still going to be on the geek track, but you have an interesting background behind you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is
shelves and such.
This is my home office, and basically surrounding all the walls are bookcases filled with books. All the ones in this room are Japanese in origin, in the sense that they are literally Japanese comic books or English translations thereof, with the exception of the center section behind me, which are CDs. So that's a portion of my music collection not involving my vinyl. Gotcha. My vinyl is in a different room here at this location, and I also have some vinyl stored in an off-site location away from Castle Cousland. So
cool.
So, but let's see.
And real quick, there's a quick question regarding your DJ years.
Yes,
I put it up on the screen for you.
I have heard of it, but it never happened at one of the stations where I was at. Like I said, our station owner, I'm not even sure if they lived in state. And it wasn't until toward the end, right before the station changed formats to kind of an underground rock station, which was really cool, actually, as far as the owner's son basically took charge of the station and played whatever music he wanted to play. And as an option, I thought that was really interesting format wise. And I think maybe now it would do better than it did then, only because things are so homogenized and it just terrestrial radio, unless you're doing the talk radio thing and want to talk politics day in and day out.
Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. So,
I take it a new Tom Likas hasn't popped up at some point in the past few years?
Not really.
Or it sounds like you were on around the same time as him.
Oh yeah. No, the number one station here is actually the old AM rock station, but now on the FM dial, where one of the other powerhouse rock stations were back in the 70s. In fact, it used to be WNAP, the Buzzard 93.1. And one of the big names back in the 70s was a guy by the name of Adam Smasher, who became fairly big, I think, in DC for a while and LA and so forth. And his son is actually an actor. So the family name is Ben Ruby. So Asher Ben Ruby became Adam Smasher, and then his son, who grew up and I guess went to school in Broad Ripple, I think, here locally, is an actor. He's kind of the big, kind of hulky guy who was like he checked people into the hospital in ER, I think, in the latter seasons, and he's a character actor. So, but about 6'4", 280, 300 pounds, big stocky guy. So, but no, the talk station here is probably the number one station. I think their ratings even eclipse the rock station, which houses Bob and Tom show, which they're, I know, nationally syndicated now, but Q95, which used to be kick-ass rock and roll back in the late 70s, early 80s, their home station for the Bob and Tom show, they actually get beat in the radio ratings by WIBC, which, like I said, used to be the AM rock station back in like the 60s. And so, I mean, it's fine. I don't want to do politics. I'd rather play music. And as much as I love, Burning for You by Blue Oyster Cult, I could live without playing that again. I would much rather play, Joan Crawford or Black Blade or, anything else by Blue Oyster Cult. And the same would be true with, I'd rather play a song off The Elder than play Rock and Roll All Night again. And I love Rock and Roll All Night, but, there's even Asylum from the non-makeup, era, has some decent tracks on it. So it just, you're just going to hear the same, 50 songs, depending on the format, unless it's pop music, in which case you're going to hear Taylor Swift and a bunch of other female singers whose names I could not tell you.
So it's like working at a convenience store, except it's your fault.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, at least at the register, you could tell yourself somebody else is doing this to me. And, and if you're the DJ, you're sitting there like, I just need the fucking money, man. I just need this money. Yeah. I'm sorry. I just need the fucking money. I just can't do anything else.
Well, and the thing is so automated that it's not like, I loved working overnights and weekends, because overnights and weekends, the boss sometimes tunes into you, but the boss isn't going to crawl out of bed because you played something that wasn't on the playlist, or you played a request, or, as long as it was, you weren't playing a country song on the rock station. You weren't playing something from like 1980 on the oldies station. No one, you wanted to play a different Chuck Berry tune. It wasn't going to be a big deal. And,
right.
But now it isn't like that anymore. And it doesn't matter, because like I said, Clear Channel has some guy in Scottsdale, Arizona, working in his home studio, That's probably not a whole lot different than me, other than he has a lot more soundproofing and stuff up. And, he records 5 shows over a couple of days that play in whatever the slot is. And if it's overnight or even on weekends, especially on like the Jack stations and the Hank stations and stuff like that, there's no one there. There may be one person there, but more than likely there's no one there because the computer's just firing off the signals. So,
Correct.
So you get the one local commercial, the 2 or 3 national commercials, and then right back into whatever the next song is on the computer. And that's just
Rob was a DJ as well in his youth.
Yep. Back when I was in college, and listening to you, Robert, and watching some of the guys in the chat, I'd like to throw my 2 cents into it if I can.
Oh, by all means.
So, like the competent man,
interrupt, but you're going to, right?
But I'm going to.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't mean to interrupt, but
I'm going to anyway.
Right. Competent man said, I never understood how any station expected to keep going if they turned into a musical jukebox. The DJs are needed to give it local flavor and to be something more than songs. That's your take. That's not what works for ratings. Because everything when it comes down to the radio is all about ratings because it's all about advertising. Just like on the internet today where everything is all about clicks. Okay. So you mentioned, Robert, the Bob and Tom show. And they're syndicated. They're all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
We get them here in Utah. Okay. The iHeart, Clear Channel, whatever the hell they're calling themselves these days.
Right.
They have a formula, for lack of a better word. Okay. And most people like to hear the same 7 songs over and over and over. Like you were mentioning earlier about doing the late show, the overnight show. That was the show I was involved in when I was in radio. And so I could kind of do exactly what you said. I don't have to play this, Chuck Berry song, but we get
the best phone calls on that.
Oh yeah, it was a 900 line, only they're calling me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was wild. You just tell people, hey, I'm doing some live requests or whatever. Give me a call at whatever the fucking phone number was.
Yeah,
and the phone lines would light up, and of course, people wanted to make requests to their honey or their sweetheart or whoever. And people wanted sometimes to hear a tune that they hadn't heard in like 20 years. And it's like, oh shit, I actually have that tune. Yeah, I can play that tune. So I'll put that on. And then the rest of the time it was a sex line.
Oh yeah.
And it was crazy the amount of people that would call just to do that it's like, wow, there's a lot of bored, lonely, horny people at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. I mean, you have like, 12 different women calling and talking dirty to you, and then of course Aaron, right?
He still does that on the internet. That's all.
Yeah. Nothing has changed there.
Right.
That's his bread and butter.
Yeah. So, but yeah, exactly. So, and you're right. And the thing is, they do. Anyone I talk to and ask them will tell you, it's like, oh yeah, I wish they'd play this. I wish they'd play this. But then you get these same people in a room and play a 30-second clip or a 10-second clip of a song, and you respond favorably, unfavorably, whatever. Almost overwhelmingly, the general populace, Burning for You, Don't Fear the Reaper. Those are the 2 Blue Oyster Cult songs. Rock and Roll All Night, Detroit Rock City. Those are the 2 Kiss songs. Black Blade, they don't respond to. Joan Crawford, they don't respond to. The Oath, they don't respond to.
Exactly.
But the thing is, most of the guys that work in radio, whether you're, someone like us, who maybe someone remembers us from wherever our market was, or someone like Eddie Trunk, will tell you, the whole reason they got into radio is because they love music. They love rock music, and in the case of a lot of the guys, it's like, I couldn't play drums. I couldn't play guitar. I couldn't play bass. But, you know, I could play UFO Doctor, and I could tell you about meeting, you know, Michael Schenker after a concert in, you know, Hoboken and and or, you know, smoking a joint with Ronnie James Dio on a tour bus, or so. You know, you had the stories and the love of the music and the appreciation for the guys in the band. And it was all about the bands and all about the songs and all about the music. And, you know, and that's great. And of course, if you're working at the station playing the music, you want to do that. You don't want to play Burning for You again for the, you know, 7th time this week and the 700th time in your life. And like I said, I love Burning for You, but I don't need to hear it again. But Black Blade, whether it's the studio version of Cultosaurus Erectus or the live version, I'll take either one any day of the week. So, but you know, or a band like Stars, which never quite made it. I think Cherry was their only hit that charted in the top 40. And I think it got to like number 33 or something like that. But, or The Tower by Angel, you know, those are the things I want to do. So, you know, if I had enough money to own my own little private radio station, yeah, I would be playing all kinds of weird album rock that FM DJs used to play in the 1970s, because they could, because, you know, no one listened to FM. All the money was on the AM stations playing the top 40 songs, the kind of stuff that, you know, once Casey Kasem started doing his show in like 1970, you know, those 40 songs, that's what was played on, you know, the local rock pop AM stations, WIFE here in Indianapolis, or WIBC or WNDE, you know, all these stations I grew up listening to, calling in, trying to win, you know, concert tickets to see Kiss at Market Square Arena. You know, the guys that were the reason that I, you know, one of the big reasons I went into radio, because of that whole, you know, that whole mystique. And obviously, considering the number of us here who've worked in radio, you know, going back to something I said, I think before the show, it's like, yeah, that's where all the misfits and the freaks went, because, you know, we were locked away from public. We got to play music, so that kept us cool and kept us calm and kept us out of trouble. You know, other than, you know, the pizza guy bringing something more than pizza, not realizing, oh, Dale's not working tonight. Oh, okay, man. Sorry. You know, I'll take that baggie back. You know, but that happened. I called and ordered a pizza, and they're like, oh, this is for the radio station. That's like, yeah, it's for the radio station. So just you know, I had a big glass window so I could see you pull up, and it's like, yeah, I'll come to the door and like, yeah, and it's all right, man. All right. Yeah. All right. The usual, right? I'm like, well, yeah, what I just ordered, you know, pepperoni, extra cheese, you know,
code for something that you weren't thinking of.
Yeah. So, you know, I got the pepperoni with extra cheese and a bag of Sensimilla. It was, dude. Yeah. That honestly happened. It's like, no, Dale's not working tonight. I'm covering for Dale. Right. So sorry.
You gotta learn to lay the land.
Oh yeah.
We have a question from Competent Man in regard to any pirate radio stations. Anyone?
Not here.
Yeah,
I
don't know any in New Jersey. I know there was a few in Pennsylvania back a couple years, well, more than a couple years ago, but decades ago.
My program director at the Oldie station ran a pirate station here in Indianapolis, and he actually was rivaling and affecting the ratings of the top 40 station.
That's pretty funny.
And basically, that station is the one that called the FCC. And the story he tells, he was out there in the garage doing his show, and a guy comes, gets out of car, comes up and says, "Hey, what you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, just playing some music." And he's like, "Ah, cool." And he's like, "Well, I'll talk to you in a little bit." He went kind of walking around, I guess, went and found the cable going to the antenna and pulled out a pair of wire cutters, cut it,
Oh shit!
took him off the air,
Damn.
came over, and it's like, hey, is your dad around? And so, I mean, I don't think he was fined. He obviously wasn't arrested or anything like that, but they took him off the air, and he eventually went into legit radio. And there's actually a documentary on local Indiana radio that talks about, and it's not his station, but one of the other pirate stations, and how they would move around their broadcast, and they would pick random, because back in the day, and of course this is something only guys our age will probably remember, when you had phone booths, you could wait at the phone booth and tell someone, hey, call me, 856-5555, and
Well,
and they call in. And of course, what the local pirate stations would do is, they'd broadcast, and it's like, hey, if you got a request, call us, and it's 555-5640, and one of the guys was waiting there at the payphone for the phone to ring, and he would write down the request and then hang up, and then pull out a dime, call the house and say, it's like, yeah, Joan wants to hear, Bobby's Boy, and, Billy wants to hear Love Me Do, and, whatever. And they'd rattle off the names, and the guys would play the request. And so that's kind of how it worked. So most of them were off the air, obviously, by the time I was listening to the radio, but occasionally I would drive around and pick up a random station where I knew it wasn't, just because they were swearing and stuff, that I could tell, this isn't a legit station. So there were a few of those still kind of popping up every once in a while back in the 1980s, but I don't know that once you start getting into the computer era, it's just too easy to do that kind of stuff here. I mean, I've done a couple of live things on YouTube that, I deleted afterwards, but that was basically it. That was just kind of my homage to pirate radio. I'd occasionally do a live stream randomly in the middle of the night, pour myself a drink, and, talk about the last concert I went to, and, the fact that, Alice Cooper still kicks ass all these years later, or how amazing it is watching Deep Purple play, even without Richie Blackmore. It's just, and how much I wish John Lord was still here, and stuff like that. So, and that's what I do, and I do like an hour live stream, and then click it off and either set it to private or eventually delete it, depending on what kind of mood I was in. So, but I mean, so there's really no reason to go to the risk and to broadcast anything like a pirate, when you can just do it kind of sort of legally now on YouTube, or
there's watch the music you broadcast with your live stream, and that's it.
yeah.
I mean, that rebellious, that R and mystique of rebelliousness is just not there anymore. That, you're breaking the law. No. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
No, well, why on earth would you want to do that when you can go back home and play Smash Brothers and mommy and daddy's basement or something like that? Which, not to knock that. I mean, I've got sons that love playing Smash Brothers. My 21-year-old loves playing it with his 6-year-old brother, which to me is cool, because I mean, that's brothers hanging out and doing stuff together. But with that kind of stuff. And the thing is, if ASCAP came at me for playing something like that, I would be like, well, okay, if there's no money being made, because the audience is just too small. I think I've had like 3 people watch me on one show that they thought, oh wow, that was cool. I've never heard of this band UFO, and it's like, yeah, that's all too common, unfortunately. But have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Michael Schenker?
MSG.
Yeah. But see, like I said, I've got a lot of friends who are artists, and I'm all about artists getting paid. So, I mean, if I ever made money doing something like that, I would have no problem giving it to the songwriters, because, like Harlan Ellison said, pay the artist, pay the writer. And so if you do the work, you should get paid for it. And unfortunately, with most of these older rock guys, it doesn't matter, because their catalogs were signed away, when they got their contracts. I mean, Dust in the Wind is not owned by anyone in Kansas. It's not that, all of their publishing was signed over to Don Kirshner when they got their contract. So, it doesn't matter, but, so no, there you go.
Cool.
Did any of those guys end up going into YouTube? Did they take advantage of the fact that, you can use these platforms nowadays, or did they just kind of fall off?
XM radio.
Well,
some went that way.
Yeah, some went that way, but there are people who were big name radio people here in this market in like the 70s and 80s, and I don't know if they still have them on, but they basically had their own radio websites. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys probably would have seen the various radio sites that were on the all over the internet, probably 10
Oh yeah,
years
you
ago.
listened to it through Winamp.
Yeah, exactly. Listening through Winamp, and what was it? Winamp smacked the donkey's ass or something like that. And I don't know if you guys remember that slogan of theirs, but yeah. So, which was cool because some of those stations, it's like, I want to hear Girl School, and you type that in, and the next thing there's Girl School doing a cover of Motorhead's Bomber or something like that. And, it was just really, really cool. And that's kind of where it went. But I think most of those have dried up now too, because, everybody's listening to their own music via their iPod or whatever their MP3 player. Well, whatever their cell phone is now.
Yeah.
So no one's listening to much of anything. So
not really. And
yeah.
Rob's over here stroking his pussy while we're discussing.
Yeah.
That's too funny. Let's get back
almost like a Bond villain.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking, $1 million. How about no, Scott? Okay. Let's get back to your shelves. So you have music, books, and is there any other geekery going on back there?
The shelf right here is pretty much all RPGs. So first edition D&D, second edition D&D, a bunch of modules, the Dragon Age tabletop RPG, a bunch of Dark Eye books, including books in German, and also the Dutch edition of the game. Because when I was guest at a convention in Germany, the Dutch publication was just coming out for the Dark Eye, and I met the person in charge of that project, and that was one of the things I had got from them. I do have some 5th edition D&D books. Up until recently, I had absolutely no 4th edition books, but a acquaintance of mine gave me some two 4th edition Dark Sun books, which I'm like, well, that's kind of cool, just because that was an interesting game setting. But I do have some 5th edition books, and then, goodness, the old fastest Star Trek game.
Okay, yeah.
And some stuff like that. And,
do you have any BattleTech?
Oh yeah, I've even got some of the new BattleTech.
You mentioned FASA, so that's where I went to, BattleTech. Yeah,
the West End Star Wars, the FASA BattleTech and stuff are on a smaller shelf right over here at the end of this L of the desk.
Oh, okay, cool.
So yeah, that's the game stuff, and then in the room right next to this is my library. That's mostly my nonfiction history books, vintage sci-fi and fantasy novels, and a bunch of American trade paperbacks and stuff. And then another room houses my comic book collection, which is
another. Oh shit! Okay, cool.
Yeah, this most of the rooms here are occupied by my stuff.
As well, they should be.
Yeah. my paramour and I were talking when we were discussing moving in together. She's like, I'd like to have one room kind of normal. I want to put up this Larry Elmore art in the front room, but so you can have a room that's all geeky, and then the rest of the house will look kind of normal. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to have a man cave. I'm going to have a house.
A man house. Exactly.
Yeah. And so that's pretty much what it is. And, oddly enough, she doesn't argue. She is a geek too. She has, for what I have for RPGs, she has for board games. So, she has at least 2 or 3 walls of nothing but board games. So, most of which I refuse to play with her just because I'm not really into board games. I'm more into RPGs.
I'm the same way. I mean, the only board game I really got into and which started me off on Dungeons & Dragons was the Dungeon board game.
Right.
And Dark Tower.
She has a couple of games that she's bought thinking that I would play. So, I mean, we've got like a couple of Conan the Barbarian board games, and we've got a couple Viking board games. And
Hero Quest.
Yeah. So those are something I might get around to playing, but I like playing RPGs. I like either as a DM, I like writing a story and directing that story, which is kind of how I look at it. I look at it as if I'm directing a movie with a bunch of actors who are really into improv, and I just kind of let them run with that. It's like, okay, you were hired, in using kind of movie terms, to play this character, and this character, and I trust your abilities as an actor to play this character. And if you don't play the character, I'll tell you as a director that, I really don't think your lawful good paladin should be stealing coin purses from the rest of the party while they're sleeping. That's not what your character would do, but fortunately, with most of the people that I game with or have game with, really I've had 2 major groups and then a couple of informal groups. But my original gaming group from the 1970s all through the 80s, the guys with whom in German class, instead of practicing der die das, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, all that, we're writing notes to each other using the dwarven runes from the old Lord of the Rings books so that they were coded. So we're writing in dwarvish runes what our characters are doing, or writing in character and then passing game notes back and forth in German class. And which was great, because if a teacher took the note, she or he couldn't make heads or tails out of it. And it made our D&D playing all the more clandestine, since we were little, devil worshipping Satanists anyway, because we're talking the 1980s. And if you played D&D, you were a little, you were
on your way to hell.
Oh yeah. Yep. On a highway to hell.
That's right.
So, and, but, no, so that was the main game group. And then, I had a second group that I kind of inherited in the 90s, and played second edition. And they were, I was doing a couple of panels at a local Sci-Fi Fantasy convention here in Indianapolis, and a friend of mine was running some games, and she was running, and this would have been in the 90s, around the time that Vampire the Masquerade was starting to get popular.
Yeah. Mid 90s.
Yeah. So she came to me and was like, I have a table full. I'm like, oh, great. People signed up for your game. That's awesome. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I don't know who any of these people are, and I have a table full. Can you please play so that I have someone on my side if I need help? And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So she's like, you have your character sheet? And it's like, well, I'm at a convention. I'm sure I've got my character somewhere. And plus, I think at the time I lived fairly close to that hotel, so it wasn't that big of a deal to go home and get my character sheet. And so I played the game. They were a bunch of kids from Speedway High School. And they're like, "Oh, that was really fun. You know, could you run us a game again sometime? And do you play D&D?" And my friend was, she's like, "Well, yeah, I do, but I live in Brazil, which Indiana is a fairly long, narrow state. Indianapolis, right in the middle. Brazil is out toward the border with Illinois. So, you know, a little bit far to commute. And like I said, these were a bunch of high school kids. So only a couple of them even had driver's license. So she's like, but you know, being a friend and being female, she threw me under the bus and said, well, Robert runs stuff and he's local. So they're like, "Oh, would you please run a game for us?" And I'm like,
Put you on the spot.
I'm like, well, maybe. It's like, you know, a bunch of high school kids. It's like they were fairly cool, but I'm like high school kids. So this is going to be like herding cats.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in my mid 20s and they're, you know, 16, 17, going on 18. And so anyway, I'm like, you clear it with your parents. I'll come over and run something. But, you know, you got to let them know this is a guy we met at the convention. He's 24, 25, whatever. And if your parents are cool with it, I'll come over there and I'll run D&D for you guys. I'll help you make characters and we'll run a setting. We'll run an adventure. And what I did was I took the game setting that my original gaming group used, which was all created by us. So this is, you know, a world created by a bunch of, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds and just developed over the course of junior high and high school. So what I did, a good buddy of mine and one of the other main DMs is a guy, I'll call him Geo. And Geo and I were like really good friends. We went camping together on a regular basis. We, you know, there were a bunch of teenage girls going on a snipe hunt with a bunch of little kids. And of course we terrorized them out in the woods because we were teenage boys and that's what you do.
Social obligation.
Yeah. And a couple of them had boyfriends. So their boyfriends were like, you know, I would be in like one area, Geo would be in another, and we'd like, you know, watch out for the killer snipes, and we'd make noises and stuff, and we'd be in different areas and then move around, you know, kind of tormenting them. The little kids are crying, the girls are crying, the guys are like, "We're gonna kick your ass, we get a hold of you, kick your ass, man," you know. So and we come back to camp and we're laughing. We are just like dying. We are gods amongst men, you know. You know how it is. And we get back to camp and his parents had no idea where we were. And so he gets in serious trouble with his dad. And, you know, his dad's just tearing him a new one. And I'm standing there with him. And it's like, "Oh, will you please hit me too or something? Because this is killing me. Seeing my best friend get torn a new one. And I'm just kind of standing there and you're not saying anything to me." And I was every bit as guilty as him. So, but anyway, my buddy, his cousin, who was a friend of mine who was in our gaming group, a bunch of us all, as we graduated, we all enlisted. Some of us literally together, some of us a little bit apart. And of course, he enlisted too, because his cousin and I were both little gung-ho nuts, you know, when you know, we were killing the Viet Cong, we were storming the beaches of Normandy, you know, we fought at the sands of Iwo Jima. We made, you know, Chuck Norris, John Wayne, and John Rambo look like a bunch of, you know, wimps, because, you know, we were gods amongst men who shot each other with BB guns, because again, that's what you did when you were a teenage boy back then.
Absolutely.
Which I've got an interesting story that involves law enforcement and how different the world is now. But anyway,
Wow.
George died in the service. And so I could never bring myself to use his characters as NPCs. And I mean, we had major good guy characters. We had major villain. We played an evil campaign. And what the two of us that were doing that, we used our good guy characters as the NPCs that our villains were fighting without giving them the names. So we were literally, his anti-paladin was going after his magic user. My assassin was going after one of my fighters, and that's how we did it. And unlike, I guess, some people's evil campaigns, despite the fact that we were playing evil characters, we weren't playing stupid characters. So it's like, if we fight amongst ourselves, our adversaries win. We don't want our adversaries to win because, Asmodeus or Mammon or whatever evil deity one of our characters served would not be pleased with us. So, we're not going to screw up with each other. We're going to, that old thing they say about paladins, lawful good, not lawful stupid. Well, lawful evil, not lawful stupid. And it's like, well, I'm chaotic evil, but I'm still not stupid, and so I couldn't play any of his characters. So I had these guys roll up characters, told them a little bit about the setting, a little bit about the world, the geography of the area they were in. And I'm like, okay, here's the thing. This is the world and this is the world as it's always been. But at a certain point early on in one of their main story adventures, they get kind of pulled aside by this guy who seems to be a very powerful mage who tells them the world is wrong. The world you think isn't the real world. There are people, legendary heroes, and even legendary infamous villains who existed that don't anymore. And up until a few days ago, none of you existed. So you are an anomaly and you are tied to what's going on. So I am going to use you, as agents to investigate this. So this is like their overarching plot device. And then they have all the little adventures that go in it, and every once in a while they get little pieces and to the puzzle and what's going on. Because one of the things we had created these really powerful ancient artifacts that took the form of swords. And there was a good sword, an evil sword, and a neutral sword. The neutral sword was held by a very powerful lizard man who was true neutral, an animal in the sense that he didn't eat people because, he was evil. They are mammals and he's a reptile and they're a food source and a good food source of protein. And, it was an animal's ethics and true neutral in alignment. My dad's paladin actually ended up with the lawful good sword and, sentient ancient artifact, and then the evil sword went to Geo's anti-paladin. Well, when Geo disappeared, the sword vanished too, because it no longer was bonded to a partner, which meant there is this ancient, highly intelligent, evil artifact somewhere loose in the world doing who knows what. Because apparently, if the good and evil sword connect in combat, it will trigger some kind of cataclysm that will destroy the world. So that can't happen. So, typical overthought out, overwrought teen D&D campaign. And that's what I threw these teenagers at. They were used to playing, you go into a room. There are 10 goblins in the room. What do? Oh, we kill the goblins. Okay. What do you do next? Well, we take all their treasure. Okay. You go in the next room. There are 20 orcs. What do? Well, we kill the orcs. That's what they thought Dungeons and Dragons was. That's how they played it. Now I have them sitting there for a half hour, and it's like, well, he said the door didn't appear to be trapped. He didn't say the door wasn't trapped. Well, are we opening the door? Just open the bloody door. So, I got them playing it a different way and thinking about it a different way. More kind of like the way you guys play on Wednesday night I had 2 errands in this group, 2 teenage errands in this group, and as opposed to one.
That sucks.
Yeah, but like I said, they were teenagers, and so I gave them a smack every once in a while and got them to settle down. So kind of hard to smack Aaron when he's over the internet, right?
Yeah, so, we wait till he's in person and then we beat him up.
So, but
Rob sits on him.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's the thing with that. So those were my two main groups, and then it's been in informal play since then. And the last few years playing Dark Eye, it's mainly been with people at conventions, and then playing over in Germany, which is really interesting. Playing a German role playing game in German. Playing they for my sake they play it in English, but playing it with German players, some of whom have been playing for 20 some odd years. So that is a really interesting experience.
I'm sure that has to be cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope I haven't bored the audience too much with that long story. For some people, I know nothing's more boring than hearing about somebody else's D&D campaign. So
well, that's why they have the option to not be here if they don't want to listen to it. We're good with this, even Rob. So, and let's push this over to well, you did say you had a law enforcement some kind of like something you were playing in the woods, and you said something about law enforcement being involved. It would be a different story now than when it happened.
This is probably 1985. Myself and we'll say M and R, two of my buddies are with me. We are decked out from head to toe in Army issue camouflage, Army issue tiger stripe camos, black beret, boonie caps, jungle boots.
Oh shit!
The whole 9 yards. We have web gear on, with canteens, with ammo pouches, everything, and we are carrying BB guns that are black stamped metal that look like 45s on our hips. We have various pump and lever action rifles, BB and pellet guns, and we are wearing full camo paint as well. And we are bebopping down a neighborhood block, and a sheriff's deputy cruises by. And he rolls down the window and he's like, "Hey boys, what are you up to?" And we're like, "Oh, we're just heading off behind the Legion Hall to head out into the woods and shoot targets and stuff with our BB guns." And which was a lie, because we were going to shoot each other with the BB guns because that's what you do when you were a normal teenage boy growing up in the 70s and 80s.
So. Yeah, you have another eye. You don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, M shot me right in the shoulder blade with a BB gun, so I had no choice but to shoot him in the nuts with a pellet.
Exactly. I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right in the fucking net.
Yes, and when he was bending over, clutching his nuts, you shoot him again in the hand.
Target of opportunity.
Exactly. He was still standing, and therefore a viable threat. I had no other choice but to fire again.
All's fair in love and war.
Exactly. So we're like, we're going off behind the Legion to shoot at cans and stuff out in the woods. And the sheriff's deputy just kind of looked at it, and he's like, "All right, you guys be careful. You behave yourselves. And if I get any calls or reports that windows are shot out or anything else in the neighborhood, I'm coming and looking for you three guys. I know what you look like. I know you're around this neighborhood, and we will find you." And I'm like, "But you guys are just shooting cans and stuff, and don't shoot at any windows? That's fine. You guys have a good day and behave yourself and be careful."
Which was highly appropriate.
And I'm like, "Not a problem. You have a good afternoon." And we went off to the woods behind the Legion Hall and near the railroad tracks, and shot each other until we had blood pouring down all different parts of our body, and called each other all kinds of names, and called each other's mothers all kinds of names. And,
that's another thing you have to do. Yeah.
So we were practicing the same kind of eloquence that Aaron shows on a daily basis. So so that's what we did, and we went back home eventually, and had to take showers and get all the camo and stuff off of us, and stank to high heaven. But we were out shooting each other and wrestling in the dirt and everything else. And to me, that seemed absolutely normal. Whereas now, if you were an American teenager, just with the BB gun, you could be in, a polo shirt and a pair of jeans. But, well, one, they don't make 45 stamp metal BB guns that look like real BB gun. That I guess they do with some of the airsoft guns, but I mean, even then they have the orange caps on them. And in some states, if you paint those orange caps black or remove them or something like that, you're committing a state offense. But yeah, there's every likelihood that someone in the neighborhood would have seen you walking down the street with a gun, and you'd have had 5 squad cars and would have been lucky to have not been shot before you said, but it's just a BB gun,
Yeah.
And
Look, officer, bang.
Yeah. And, that's one of those things I tell people. It's like, that was my childhood. And, you can wring your hands all you want about how we shouldn't have been, shooting each other with BB guns, especially the moms out there or whatever. But that was freedom. We learned a lot from that. We toughened up. It was a display. It was a rite of passage. And, I have no doubt that, the first kid in the when what was it, Ralphie? I'm sure that after Ralphie recovered, he was, he was taking his Red Ryder BB gun out and shooting his little brother or something, because that's just what you did. And more often than not, no harm, no foul. So, exactly. And I survived it. And tell you what, getting shot in the nuts or getting shot in the shoulder blade by a BB gun is a hell of a lot less painful than going through a divorce. So,
Absolutely. Let's we're coming up on the hour and a half mark, and I want to segue this into a area that Rob likes as well. This is right up his alley, and something that you're into, and that would be music, and particularly heavy metal.
Oh yeah.
So
really into what I guess would be called melodic heavy metal. As far as modern bands go, bands like Hammerfall and Sabaton and Powerwolf and things like that. A lot of European metal bands, but the European metal bands that can actually sing, not necessarily the Cookie Monster kind of vocals. I like melody. I like harmony. I like things like that. Hammerfall I've seen in concert. Sabaton I've seen in concert. I've got the guitar picks from both. I've got a picture of myself and my oldest son with Hammerfall. Really cool Swedes. So I mean, as far as new stuff, I like that. I like Blind Guardian as well. It's kind of hard not to like, bands who are doing heavy metal Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal Dragonlance even. So that's new stuff I like. Older stuff I like, obviously, Black Sabbath. I'm one of those heretics that I actually prefer the Dio era of Sabbath over the Ozzy era, which isn't to say I dislike the Ozzy era by any stretch of the imagination. I just think Heaven and Hell is a perfect album. I mean,
yes.
If I have any complaint about the album Heaven and Hell is that it's not long enough. It needs another song or two. It's just too damn short. And Mob Rules is awesome as well. So, I love the Dio era of Sabbath. And then the band's Kiss, which you could argue is more hard rock than actually heavy metal. I love Motorhead. I think Lemmy was one of the coolest people on the face of the earth. I mean, just Dio solo stuff. So those, what would be considered classic, heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, both of whom I'm fortunate enough to have seen in concert. Iron Maiden doing their classic stuff, not necessarily just doing whatever their new album is at the time, which I know is like an every other tour sort of thing. So I actually got to see them do kind of their greatest hits concert. I actually had tickets to see Doro from Warlock.
Yes, Doro Pesh.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I had concert tickets to see Doro, Stars and Angel, Judas Priest, Rammstein, Sabaton, Hammerfall, and I was just kind of waiting to see what other bands were getting anywhere close to me last year, and every single one of them were either canceled or delayed. So no concerts really in 2020. And UFO, I was going to see UFO at least one last time because Phil Mogg of UFO was retiring and hanging it up. So they were doing this like anniversary tour, which I got to see them. I got to see UFO and Saxon play on a double bill. Like, you want to talk about Saxon was so loud and so. I took my 3 older sons to see Saxon and UFO, which meant I was taking my, at the time, 19-year-old son. I was taking my 27, 28-year-old son, and my oldest son, which is about a year older than so if the one was 27, he was 28. There's like half the year they are 2 years apart in age, half the year they're 1 year apart. They're a year and a half difference. June of 1 year to December 31st of the other. So my oldest son is a musician. All of my sons are musicians. My 6-year-old is even a musician. So he just got a keyboard for Christmas. So I always tell women, I'm always looking for a future ex-Mrs. Cousland. And you get a house, you get a beautiful, intelligent kid who's musically gifted. Sometimes you get a car. But
you get half of one room for some of your clothes, and that's it.
Yeah. But that's only during the marriage. I'm talking about in the divorce, because like I said, it's always a future ex-Mrs. But anyway, which is a Jurassic Park reference to Dr. Ian Malcolm, who was the coolest character in Jurassic Park. Yes. Oddly enough, I've used that line over and over since that movie came out. And a few years ago, I was at a convention and I said that, and some 20-year-old, 25-year-old single mother heard me and tried to use that to cancel me within a certain group of costumers. And I'm like, it's a Jurassic Park reference. You're at Dragon Con, a huge geek event. How do you not get that? But
Spurgs and retards.
They give us a Dragon Con. See, that's one of the chillest places I've ever been to. I don't see how you can manage that. Yeah, especially not however many years ago this was.
Well, it's
worse now.
The costuming end of things within fandom has gotten so toxic over the years. I mean, at one point in time, I know I'm getting off the topic here, but at one point in time, when you costumed at a convention, it was like wearing your colors. It showed what gang you were in, what tribe you were in, what pack you were in. You were into Star Trek. You were into Star Wars. You were into Space 1999. You were into whatever, Battlestar Galactica, or you were a literary fan because you were dressing up as some character out of a Robert Heinlein novel or out of Dune or something like that.
Doc Savage.
So, Doc Savage, or from from one of the pulp novels. You were the Shadow. You were the Spider. You were whomever, the Green Hornet, or a character from comics. And guys did it and girls did it. And it was your colors. It showed what gang you were in. Now it's a business. It's a business for 5s and 6s to get attention and money and boob jobs occasionally, especially if they become professionals. So not much different than, a stripper when you get right down to it. And to be a guy doing that for the pure love of the art, the creation of the costume, the affinity for the character, for the acting, for, whatever your reason for doing it is, if you're not doing it for some kind of commercial reason or ego stroke, for that dopamine hit, you just don't fit in. And of course, now that, the cheerleaders are watching Sailor Moon and the football players are into, are gamers because, they play Call of Duty or Halo, those of us who were into the stuff back then and faced the crap that comes with, being a reasonably intelligent, bookish person, even if you didn't put up with any crap back then, you were still not one of the cool kids. Well, now the cool kids, it's their thing. And of course, it doesn't help that the companies are marketing to that. And, well, yeah, because, it's cool to be a geek now. Big Bang Theory, it's cool to be a geek. It's like, no, it's not cool. You're still not going to get invited to any of the cool Hollywood parties unless you're a kid and they want to have their way with you because they're all a bunch of sickos out there. And you're not cool. They just see you as a money pump, because it's like, as long as we slap Star Trek on it, it can be the worst crap on the face of the earth and you'll fork over the money. It's Star Wars. As long as we slap the name on it, you'll fork it over because you guys are, you've never been cool and you're not cool now, but you have money. So we want that. So that kind of thing.
That pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, where were we before I completely derailed the thing? We were talking about
music,
concerts.
Yeah.
Concerts. So Saxon and UFO. I'm taking my 3 older boys because my youngest at the time would have been 4 or 5, and I had to kind of let his mom win one. And it's like, yeah, maybe 4 or 5 is a little bit too young to go to a Saxon concert. So that's okay.
Let's give them your protection.
Yeah. So we'll wait. But anyway, so we're there. My oldest son is like me. He's really into the music. So he's up front with me, talking to the band, into the music. My third son is not real comfortable with crowds. So he was back out of the maelstrom where he could listen to the music comfortably, drinking a Coke and enjoying the music. And then, like, when between bands, he came up and talked to us to see how we were doing. My second son, who is the most like me, both in appearance and temperament, was there scoring phone numbers from all the girlfriends and wives at the Saxon and UFO show.
Nice.
So needless to say, all of my sons had a really good time. And during Denim and Leather, Biff Byford wore my son's denim leather vest over his coat during the song, getting it all nice and sweaty, and then autographed the inside of the vest before giving it back to him.
That's awesome.
That's fucking memory to
yes.
So he's gonna hold on to that for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. So needless to say, my older boy had all these guys between the ages of 45 and 60 telling him he was the coolest guy there and trying to buy him beers and everything else. So
nice.
So it was really cool. So all of my sons had a really good night. And like I said, there were probably I don't know what Rollo means by hypergamy. I mean, gee, all these married women and girlfriends giving some young dude their phone number at a concert while their husbands and boyfriends were like watching the bands and drinking beer with the other guys. I don't know how that happens. Exactly. Surely Rollo hasn't written an essay on it, has he?
Probably more than one, actually.
Yeah. speaking of him for a minute, he is probably one of the first guys I found in the I guess red pill community, and I've heard about it, and people, you see things, and the thing about Rolo for me is there's a lot of crap online you can read, a lot of opinions, a lot of experts. But with Rolo, he's one of the first guys whose essays I would read, good and bad. And it's like, yeah. First divorce, high school girlfriend, married her when I was 21, had my first son with her. Love of my life. Not at all the person she claimed to be, because she wanted me as a boyfriend. So when she said she loved Billy Idol, she didn't. She listened to country, but I liked Billy Idol, so she liked Billy Idol. I'm into comic books. She's into comic books. Well, when she went to the comic book store with her brother, she bought some Legion of Superhero comics because her brother said comics are worth money. So she thought she would have them and they'd be worth money someday. So she collected some Legion of Superhero comics. So on and so forth. So dated her 17 to 21, married at 21. And then, she's not into any of the things. And my wanting to go to a convention is a problem. My wanting to hang out with my buddies on New Comic Book Night at the pizza place next to the comic book store once a week is a problem. And so on and so forth. Well, my only problem with her was her cheating on me. So,
I'll do it.
So, next thing you know, we've been married for about 9 years. It is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and I come home from work to an empty house and a note. I've taken the boys. I'm moving back in with my parents.
No shit.
We're done. Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Needless to say, Thanksgiving with my family, without my wife and sons, was an interesting experience. Day after Thanksgiving, I get a phone call. Yeah, I'm in the car with the sister-in-law, who's a real piece of work. Don't miss her at all. We're coming back from the attorney. I've just filed papers for the divorce. Because, see, she had met this really nice Christian man on AOL in a chat room. And so anyway.
Jesus Christ.
So I try to be understanding. I try to be a good guy. I do all the right things, which, of course, are all the wrong things.
Exactly.
And so that's what I mean. When I read some of the stuff Rolo's written, and some of the stuff Rich has written or talks about on YouTube, it's like, yeah, I've lived that. But not only have I lived the bad stuff, and I mean, that was pretty bad, but the divorce wasn't even final yet. I mean, she'd filed for it. She's already living with the guy. He's in what was my house, although his toothbrush kept disappearing because my oldest son found his toothbrush where my toothbrush went and threw it in the trash repeatedly.
Should just wash the toilet with it.
Yeah. Well, he was probably 9 or 10 at the time, so he was still kind of young and not quite that devious. It was somebody's toothbrush was where his dad's belonged, and it didn't belong there. So
good kid.
Yeah. And but the divorce isn't final. I'm 29, pushing 30, getting divorced and miserable. But I have an 18-year-old girl that just graduated high school sharing my bed. So, but yet for a while there, I was still miserable because it's like, and a lot of it was missing the boys, but a lot of it, but that's what I mean. It's so I've lived that, but I've also lived there's girl A and girl B, and they know about each other, and they both sleep with me, sometimes on the same day, once at the same time, because I just didn't care. And it's like, I'm going to be me. I'm going to do my own thing. And, you have to be worthy of me. I don't have to be worthy of you. And, because I know I'm worthy of you. I'm more than worthy of you. And that confidence and that attitude, that as Aaron puts it so eloquently, that being an asshole works.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially if it's genuine.
time.
Yeah, especially if it's genuine. Especially if it's like, you aren't the only female in the world.
Mhm.
And that one-itis, that
you have to have that irrational self-confidence and be willing to go all the way with it.
Yeah. And it is. And I will tell you, I learned a lot in that divorce. I definitely had those negative thoughts. But I had those two boys that I cared about, that I loved about, that I needed to be there for as much as I could, which, as I think any man who's ever gone through a divorce or knows someone who's gone through a divorce that happens to be a man, damn well that it's not easy being there for the boys. And it's not because you don't want to be, or any of your kids. It's not because you don't want to be. It's not because you don't make the effort. It's because there's literally no one on your side to back you up, to be with you. And if you don't be a man and a father to your son, someone else will. And it is, and it may be the boy lover that lives down the block. It may be the guy in the gang. It may be, a cop who arrests him because he broke into some place he shouldn't have. You never know. So you've got to do it. And so I did, and I got through that, and that really changed my attitude on a lot of things. And I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about women. So when I discovered Rollo's essays, I'm like, well, I know a lot of people claim to be experts, and a lot of people say they know it's this and they know it's that. I did the field test. I failed and I succeeded. So having done the field research, having lived out in the jungle with the chimps, I know when I read somebody's essay on this is how this happens, this is why this happens, and this is why you can't think about things the way a man graduating from high school, graduating from college, going to work at your father's business, going to work as an apprentice for someone at the turn of the century, and you marry the girl that you courted for however long, and you get married and you go to have your 8 kids or whatever, how it works, because that old way does not work now, because the game is different, which means you have to play smarter. And
Rollo checks out, as opposed to, well, you see the reason there. They got divorced is because you just weren't leading enough.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's dungeon master to the Masculine Geek Dungeons and Dragons game. So there you go.
Yeah. So, but anyway, just that's another reason why I'm glad, because I mean that eventually led me to meeting you guys, and either following you on Twitter, watching you guys game, watching you guys do shows and things like that. So that's been really cool, because having that male space,
absolutely,
and having it be a positive male space, because there used to be a time where gentlemen like us could we'd leave our offices or our businesses or whatever, and we'd go to our club or our salon or whatever, and we'd pour a drink and light up a cigar, and we would discuss the things that were important and make decisions about how we were going to affect things. And for all the problems in the world, I think for the most part, as a species, we men have affected things pretty positively, because never in the entire span of human history has a human being had to work so little to not just survive, but thrive. There's a reason you look at those pictures from like the 1920s and the 1940s and even the 1950s, and everyone looks so gaunt and so slender, in some cases so muscular, because to survive took work, lots of it.
And you did have to have strength,
Yeah.
both physical and mental.
And yeah, and to whether you want to use emotional or spiritual or whatever, but I mean, you had to have something inside you, that a core that kept you going when things got tough.
Yeah. No,
And
you're right.
but the thing is, it's like now the obesity problem, that's amazing, because you can get to be 300, 400, 500 pounds and survive and apparently pay your bills and make it, because of various reasons, because we have it that good, which is part of the reason why I think some people are so miserable, because there's I don't know if I want to say an esoteric component or something a little bit more, that, this is all there is, eating pizza on the couch with my glass of box wine, watching Netflix. I mean, that's the sum of human existence. And it's like, we need that hunger. We need that thirst for something more. And I think sometimes when we're in social groups, especially with guys, whether we like it or not, whether we're always comfortable with it or not, I think when you get guys together in a social group, we can't help but to push each other and to push each other's buttons, because we can't help but to compete with each other, even if we absolutely love the guys we're with and we'd fight or die for them. We can't help but push each other's buttons and also push each other to excel, because it's like, you let your wife do that to you, Robert, you putz. It's like you don't bring back in the trash. Well, it's like, that dose of reality, as well as that, we tear each other down, but we build each other up. I mean, that's what guy friends do for each other, because you can only show that kind of vulnerability to another guy, and it has to be
that's the issue. I mean, the male space is needed. Men by nature are physical, and we're creative, and we do creative adventure. The problem is, over the years, the past 100, maybe 120 years, especially with marriages and relationships, men look at women. You see this all the time, and I've done it in my past too. It's like, you get the girl, and then she becomes your everything, and then the stuff you do with your guy friends falls by the wayside. And then we're like, something in our gut says, oh, fuck, man, this is not right. But we continue anyway, and then it fails.
Oh, yeah.
Your girl is not your friend. I can't, every time I see that, oh, I've married my best friend. No, you didn't. All right. And I guarantee you're not getting laid regularly. You're getting once a year fucking sex, and you're a miserable fat fuck.
Yeah.
That I bet paychecks on that. The problem is, guys don't have that camaraderie where they do get together at the lounge. Red Crusader mentioned the men's club, where, like you said, we get together, we discuss the day, we talk about projects. We're not sitting back with cigars, twirling our imaginary mustaches, planning the demise and subjugation of women. No, we don't. You're the furthest thing from our mind. Okay, as far as like any of that shit, man, we'll talk about, and hey, well, this, my girl did this, my girl did whatever, or you're doing that venting and letting off steam and whatnot. We're like, hey, did you see that girl? Whatever. But for the most part, we're not even thinking about that shit, and we're plotting and planning.
Yeah, or we're talking about Saxon and how,
exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah,
like exactly what we're doing here. But
who kicked my ass, by the way. They were so damn loud that I was worn out by the time UFO hit the stage. I mean, they were just they pummeled me. They pummeled me, and it was glorious. It was glorious. I walked out of that show. I couldn't hear after the concert, after Saxon, after UFO. I literally couldn't hear. I had to be at a job to do some bookkeeping for a local small business in about 3 hours. and I had to drop my sons off after the concert before going home, basically laying down for an hour, showering, and then driving 45 minutes to a business to basically do all their company financial stuff.
Oh, shit.
So, and I'm like, not a young guy, but I still did it because screw you, universe. I'm not going to go quietly into that good night. I'm going to go to a concert. I'm going to stay up all night. I'll grab some White Castle on the way home, shower, and go to work because I ain't dead yet.
Exactly.
So, but yeah. And, but I mean, we get the girl and we're doers. So we make their realities possible, and more often than not no one notices that we're doing it. So it's like, well,
we're definitely taken for granted in that regard.
Yeah. And which is why I'm very glad relationship wise I'm in the situation I'm in currently, because I mean, well, one of the things you and I had talked about was the fact that you mentioned something about this girl posing, boyfriend taking the picture. I don't think it was in this particular instance, but I mean we've all seen it. The guy hanging
that
off.
post I made.
But we've all seen the picture of the boyfriend hanging off the side of a cliff with a 300-foot drop in order to get just the right angle and just the right lighting of his girlfriend in the sexy pose for her to post on Instagram. And I posted a picture and it's like, oh yeah, here's one of me, and I was in one of my costumes, and I'm like, oh, by the way, my paramour took this, because I don't take pictures of her, she takes pictures of me. We go places, we do things, and it's I'm what's being done as far as whether it's on a photo shoot, especially if I'm on a photo shoot for an artist. I get the call that they want me to go to Boston for the weekend at the last minute to basically be a walking advertisement in costume for their product. And I don't get but we were going to go to my mom's this weekend, or I had plans with
probably
the girl
excited to go with you
or whatever. Sometimes she does, and other times she stays here and takes care of my son because it's my job, and and she has a job too. She's a corporate executive, but and I found one thing I've learned since my first marriage, that there are very few problems in a marriage that can't be headed off at the pass with a nice loving swat on the ass.
Amen.
And it's like we're just we're either not going there, or if we're going there, these are the terms in which we're going there, and it's my terms. And here's the thing, she like I said, she is a corporate executive. She makes multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar decisions that could make or break the company for whom she works. But we have what I want for dinner. And more often than not, we have, before everything was kind of shut down and we worked from home, we had for dinner what I wanted that she cooked for me when she came home from work. And, but I take out the trash. I do things, but she does things too, because it's not all what I do to make her life better. She does for me. It's this is maybe a little bit crude and a little bit graphic, but it's like, I'm a little bit of I made that mistake a second time.
Bacon with the
but guess what? X number 2 is still there for me. So she didn't take anything. She didn't cost me anything. And in fact, there's a very good chance we'd still be married if my girlfriend hadn't gotten pregnant. So
Okay.
there you go. And yes, they both knew about each other, and because I set the rules, and I wanted to live somewhere else, and so it was just easier to sever that. We had joint custody of our son, and so that's 4 boys, 3 women, and out of the 3, only one was I would consider a mistake, because as Rolo says, those were prime plate spinning years that I kind of squandered there. So, but I learned a lot. So I write that off as, yes, it was a loss, but I learned something out of it. And like any other time life kicks you in the testicles, if you lay there holding your nuts and you don't get up and you just lay there crying, you're lost.
Yeah, life is going to walk right over you.
Right. But you get up and you go on and you do what you got to do, and you learn something from it, and you don't make all of those same mistakes again. It works out pretty good. So ex number 2 and I are still very, very close. She did not take my son for me. She did not take anything from me, really. I still let her buy the house for me, which worked out fine because I didn't want to have multiple house payments anyway. And so that worked out, and she and I are still really close and get along fine. And so no problems there. So yeah, I made that mistake, but like I said, sometimes you're slow to learn. But like I said, the second marriage was very, very different than the first, because there were yeah, I'm not going to go into all that, but yeah,
that'll be for round 2. And speaking of which, we are at the 2-hour mark, and I like to keep it around an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Right.
And we're definitely going to have you back on, and for sure.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we didn't get to do enough music talk, so
no, we have to delve further into about anime, more comic books, more of the good geek stuff, and we can talk about women as well. So what we're going to do next is a little bit of housekeeping. So I know a lot of people have enjoyed this episode very much, as we have. Where can everyone find you?
Robert Cousland on Twitter. In fact, I think it's an actual picture of me on Twitter, not artwork. Although if you look on Robert Cousland on YouTube, there are only a couple of videos there, not of me. I think one is of gameplay, and the other is it's a cutscene from a video game, and the other is Michael Palin from Monty Python talking about all the people that try to control you and tell you what to think and how to think, and how Monty Python isn't about that, which seemed kind of, apropos current events, and also just my own personal philosophy on things. So Robert Cousland on Twitter, Robert Cousland also on Facebook, but I don't accept a lot of friend requests there because I use some of that for business reasons. And then, but Twitter's probably the easiest place to find me. But if you do monitor Robert Cousland on YouTube, you may occasionally see me pop up, either playing music or venting about something or talking about something on a live stream. And just hanging out. So you never know. So, but look for me primarily on Twitter.
Cool. And I know if my memory serves me well, I think we talked a while back on Twitter about having you on to play Star Frontiers.
Yeah.
Get Rollo to run a game. And not for nothing, be great to actually have you on playing D&D as well. So
okay.
That would be something that we could look into going forward.
Well, we'll see, because I know you guys are still pretty much neck deep in an adventure right now. So
this one's about to wrap up soon.
Okay.
So I mean, obviously James will be playing as well if he has the time and wants to.
Yeah. And you guys are playing 5th edition, yes?
It's sort of an amalgam of 5th edition and 1st edition.
Okay. So the best edition, and then the edition of D&D that's the most like D&D since 2nd edition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is correct. And I've always been a big fan of Advanced, the first edition.
Oh yeah, me too. Even the basic and stuff I loved. So, but basic, the old school D&D, advanced D&D, and then second edition. Which second edition to me felt like first edition, but with everybody's house rules. You know, you're a wood elf and you want to be a ranger. Yeah, you can be a ranger. You know, that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You just had to get the demons and the gods back from the first edition because they were all deleted because of the satanic panic.
Oh, ridiculous! They removed, well, and also they removed the H.P. Lovecraft Cthulhu stuff because of the licensing issues. After it was already printed, the first run of Fiendfall, I think Fiendfall, yeah.
No, the deities and demigods had the
deities and demigods. That's it. Yeah,
I've got an original deities and demigods
Cthulhu stuff in it,
with the Cthulhu stuff and the Elric stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I have Elric stats.
Nice. Yeah, they removed both of that in further editions because of the licensing. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
So, but anyway, that's where you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Robert Cousland. Just look for Robert Cousland, and you 8 out of 10 times you're going to probably find me. So if you actually are looking for me, that's where I am. So, and hopefully I'll be back hanging with you guys. So
absolutely. Yes, indeed. Now, Rob, we already know because it says here, but where can we find you, Rob?
Rob says .net.
That's right. And we missed the hour mark. What do you normally do at the hour mark?
Hit the like button. God damn it.
There you go. And last but not least, Mr. James Streisand, where can everyone find you?
Well, at the moment, you can find me at Eyes of the Forest issue 1 on Indiegogo. We released that the other day. And if you want to see social media, you can follow me at James Streisand Effect on paypig.org. I joined Dick Masterson's Mastodon server.
That's hysterical.
I started joining the Federated Internet, their federated social media profiles, where you can, it works like email. You can set up your account there and then you're good to go. You're not going to get nuked off anything. You could follow people from the segregated internet, basically.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. I use it more often than I do Twitter nowadays. So speaking of which, I'll hook you guys up with that pretty soon.
Please do. Now look at this late motherfucker right here. Conk. Sorry, buddy. We are on the way out. And speaking of that, we are going to wrap it up now. So until next time, everyone, thank you, everyone, for being in the chat and hanging out and being great chat holes, as Rob would say. Now, Rob, take us out.
Meh.